Good morning, everyone. We're continuing here in the Timer DEVORAH, Mida Beis Noise Avoin, bearing the sin, just like HaKadosh Baruch Hu bears the frustration and the difficulties that people present to him. So too our job is to bear the sin, the pain, the frustration, the disappointment, and the angst that we have against others. Be patient, give them time, be understanding, be accepting, and the like. In that way, you're always leaving the door open, that this person can rectify his ways, can ask you forgiveness, can become a better person, could do tshuva, could return to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, return to you as a faithful friend, a faithful spouse, a child, and the like. And therefore, we have to be so patient, so loving, so understanding, so slow to anger, just like HaKadosh Baruch Hu noisei avain, to bear this sin. I want to leave you, before we move on to the next trait, I want to leave you with a story that really typifies this idea that we are describing. One of the great mechanchim of our generation, who deals extensively with struggling children, kids that are struggling in their Yiddishkeit, struggling in their emotional wellness, struggling in their ruchnius and their spirituality, is a man by the name of Rav Shimon Russell. He lives in Eretz Yisrael, and he's been helping tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of parents across the world get a grasp on how to raise their children. He tells over the following story that took place many years ago when he used to live in Lakewood. There was a family living in Lakewood who had a son that had gone off the derech, Rachmana litzlan, no longer keeping mitzvahs, still living in the house, but mitzvahs was not his thing. He was very angry. He was a very bitter young man. He made it very difficult in the house, and he was not pulling the line at all to make things peaceful for the family. So one Friday night, the father called up to his son, we'll call him Yitzi, and he said, Yitzi, I'm going to shul, would you like to come? No. Okay, the father goes off to shul, he comes home, they're standing by the Shabbos table, singing Shalom Aleichem, Eshes Chayil. Yitzi is not there yet. Suddenly they hear the door open, and Yitzi comes downstairs, Friday night, Shabbos, a beautiful religious family in Lakewood, New Jersey. He comes down in a pair of jeans and a t-shirt, maybe a yarmulke, maybe not a yarmulke, with a very defiant look on his face. And he's standing there glaring at his father and his mother and his beautiful siblings who are standing around the Shabbos table. And the father is finishing his singing of Shalom Aleichem and Eshes Chayil, and then it's time for Kiddush. And Yitzi moves his way, standing defiantly against the wall, and he's right near the light switch. Nobody thinks much of it, but that's where he's standing. The father begins making Kiddush, and it's very tense in the room at this point. Yitzi is glaring, the father is on eggshells, the mother is probably silently crying, the siblings are wondering what's going to happen, and Yitzi is just standing there. And the father is saying, Yoy Mashishi, Vayuchulu Hashemayim v'aretz v'chol tzavam. Everything is moving along peacefully, and suddenly Yitzi, in the middle of Kiddush, moves back towards the light switch and purposely turns off the light on Shabbos in his family's home while his father's in the middle of making Kiddush. At that point, the father lost it. So many months of pent-up anger and frustration. He drops the Kiddush cup down to the table, and he screams, I'm going to get you, and he starts running after Yitzi, and they're running around the table, running and running and running. The mother is screaming, the kids are screaming, everybody's crying, they're trying to stop their father. The father is furious, and Yitzi is angry and defiant, and Yitzi finally escapes from the house. He runs outside, he picks up a rake that's on the front lawn, and he begins smashing all the windows of his parents' house, one by one, smashing the dining room windows, the living room windows. Then he drops the rake, and he runs off into the night on Friday night. Families left in the house devastated, crying, sobbing. They can't believe what has just happened. Yitzi, he ran off to an uncle who lived there in Lakewood that he was close to. After Shabbos is over, the uncle calls Yitzi's parents, and he says, your son is with me. He's very much upset, you can understand, worked up from the way that everything went down on Shabbos. And I believe that he's going to stay with me for right now till things calm down. Okay, at least the parents know where he is. At that time, they called Rabbi Russell, who was a young therapist at the time in Lakewood. He was just really beginning to deal with this whole sugya, the whole idea of the off the derech children. And they told him the story, and he worked with them for months on end, how to understand their son, how to love their son, how to be forgiving of the son, how to be accepting of the son. But there was no communication. Yitzi refused to communicate. After about 6 months, the uncle calls the parents and he says, Yitzi would like to know if he can come home for Shabbos this week. He misses you and he would like to see you. Parents, on one hand, were overjoyed, how much they missed their son. On the other hand, so nervous. They knew what happened last time. And they called Rabbi Russell and they sat with him for another few hours, and he went through every detail of the Shabbos Suda, how to accept him, how to love him, how to bring him back into the house, how not to put any pressure on him, how to deal with another mishap if he would turn off the lights one more time during Kiddush. And sure enough, they said, yes, we would love for Yitzi to come home. And he came home that Friday afternoon, and everybody hugged him and they kissed him, and he was still wearing his jeans and his t-shirt, and he had this look of defiance on his face, but it was Yitzi. It's their son. They love him. They care about him. His siblings were so excited to see him. They missed him after all these months. And they showed him to his room, and they made the room look beautiful for him and comfortable and spacious, everything he could possibly want. Comes Friday night, father's going to daven in shul, and he calls up Yitzi, I'm going to shul, would you like to come? No, that's okay, Ta, that's okay, I'm going to stay here. Okay. Father goes to shul, comes home, Yitzi's still in his room. They start singing Shalom Aleichem, Yitzi's still in his room. Start singing Eishes Chayil, Yitzi's still in the room. The scene is beginning to look a little bit familiar to them. They're on eggshells. Suddenly they hear the door open up and Yitzi walks down. Jeans, t-shirt, defiant, angry look on his face. And he takes his place standing right by the light switch again. And the father begins Kiddush. He's trained for this. He worked himself up to be ready for anything that's going to happen. Yoy Mashishi, Mayichulu Hashemayim V'Aretz V'Chol Tzavam. And everyone's watching what's going to happen. And suddenly Yitzi takes a step back against the wall, and he once again hits the light switch, and the lights turn off. And this time the father continues saying Kiddush. Zeicher l'maaseh Bereishis. And when he finishes Kiddush, he passes out wine to everyone there. And he walks over to his son Yitzi, and he gives him a wine glass. And he said, I wish I would have known then what I know now. Please forgive me, my dear son. And at that moment, Yitzi breaks down crying. The father breaks down crying. They hug in an embrace, heaving sobs on each other's shoulders. The mother comes over. She starts crying. She's heaving sobs. The children come over. They start crying and they're heaving sobs, and the whole family falls to the ground crying and crying and crying. And that night was the night when Yitzi began to be healed. That was the night when he saw how much his parents loved him, and they cared about him, and they understood him, and they would do anything for him because they were noisei avayin. And the end of the story is that Yitzi began to rehabilitate himself in his own inner world, his problems, his issues, his pain. And he went michayil l'chayil, from one strength to the next, until he eventually ended up in yeshiva in Eretz Yisrael. and he became a frum person, religious, keeping Torah and mitzvahs. He got married, he's raising a beautiful family, and everybody is with a simcha, with a joy, with a happiness. Why? Because they were noisei avain. They bear the sin. And when you bear the sin and you accept another person and you understand another person and you're patient with them, you never know the miracles and you never know the simcha and you never know the positive impact it's going to make on another person to bring them back to the place where they truly belong and want to be. Have a wonderful day emulating the ways of HaKadosh Baruch Hu.